The metal is crying. It is a sound that does not register on any digital sensor. It does not show up on the $5 million holographic diagnostic screens. But to an ear that has spent 40 years listening to the heartbeat of mechanical giants, the sound is as loud as a gunshot. Shut down engine number 2 immediately. The old man's voice is low, but it carries a weight that cuts through the howling wind of the approaching storm. Thomas stands on the wet tarmac of Hangar 3, his faded gray overalls soaked with rain, his hand pressed firmly against the cold metal casing of the turboprop engine. Across from him stands Arthur, the newly appointed chief of maintenance. Arthur's pristine white hard hat is spotless, his designer leather shoes barely touching the grease on the floor. He looks at the old man with a mixture of amusement and deep disgust. "What did you just say, Thomas?" Arthur looks down at his tablet, where a series of bright green waves and checkmarks are pulsing in perfect harmony. The AI diagnostic scan is 100% complete. The acoustic sensors on our new digital diagnostic rig show absolutely zero anomalies. The vibration index is perfect. And you are telling me to abort the launch of a critical medical relief flight because of a ghost in your head? Thomas does not look at the tablet. He does not need to. He looks at the heavy, dark clouds rolling over the edge of the runway, and then back at the massive composite propeller blades. The metal is crying. The internal main shaft has a microfracture deep within the housing. It is spinning at 1700 RPM right now, and it sounds smooth to your machines because the crack is under tension. But the moment this aircraft enters the high-altitude turbulence over the storm zone, that tension will shift. The shaft will snap. And when it does, the entire propeller assembly will tear itself off the wing and shred the cabin. Arthur lets out a cold, sharp laugh. He steps closer, pointing his expensive digital pen directly at Thomas's chest. "Let me remind you of something, old man. Your 40 years of grease monkey experience do not equal a degree from the Aerospace Institute. I was hired to modernize this hangar, to get rid of the slow, expensive, manual guesswork that old relics like you use to justify your paychecks. This is an ATR-72, carrying 12 of the region's top pediatric surgeons and 3 tons of critical life support equipment. The children in the flooded valley have been waiting for 5 days. If this plane does not leave in 30 minutes, the airspace will be locked down for 3 days by the typhoon. The board of directors is watching this flight. The media is outside the gates. And you want me to tell the governor and the press that we are grounding our flagship humanitarian vessel because an old mechanic has a feeling in his bones?" Thomas does not flinch. He has seen men like Arthur before. Men who worship numbers on a screen because they have never had to hold a dying engine in their bare hands while the sky is falling. I am not talking about a feeling, Arthur. I am talking about physics. When metal begins to shear at a microscopic level, it creates a high-frequency whistle. It is a harmonic distortion. Your digital sensors are calibrated to filter out high-frequency noise to avoid false alarms. Your million-dollar machine is literally programmed to ignore the very sound of the disaster that is about to happen. Arthur's smile vanishes instantly, replaced by a cold, arrogant sneer. That is enough. You have been dragging your feet on every single inspection since the day I took over. You hate the fact that a man half your age is running this department, and you are trying to sabotage this project to make my system look bad. I have a digital safety certificate, signed by the chief engineer of the manufacturing company. I have a clean diagnostic report from the state-of-the-art AI scanner that my family's tech firm supplied to this airport. Your opinion is obsolete. Your contract is up for review next month, Thomas. If you don't step away from that engine right now and let the crew board, I will not only fire you for insubordination, I will make sure you lose your pension. Think about your boy. Think about Toby. How are you going to pay for his special school if you are blacklisted from every hangar in the country? The mention of his son's name makes Thomas's hand tighten against the metal wing. Toby. His 8-year-old boy, who has never seen the color of the sky, but can hear the wings of a butterfly from across a silent room. The boy whose medical treatments cost more than Thomas's monthly wage. Arthur knows this. He is using the boy's survival as a weapon to force the old man's silence. Thomas looks up at the cockpit window. Inside, the pilots are running through their pre-flight checklists, their faces illuminated by the soft blue glow of the instrument panels. They are completely unaware that they are sitting on a ticking time bomb. They trust the maintenance crew. They trust the hangar. They trust the green checkmarks on Arthur's tablet. Arthur steps back, checking his gold watch, and waves his hand to the security guards standing near the hangar doors. Get this man off the flight line. He is no longer authorized to touch this aircraft. Clear the area and signal the captain that the aircraft is cleared for taxi. 2 large security guards step forward, their boots splashing in the growing puddles of rain on the concrete floor. Thomas looks at the propeller blades one last time. The wind rises, making the massive blades spin slowly in the draft. To anyone else, it is just the sound of a storm. But to Thomas, it is a scream. The rain outside does not stop. It beats against the thin metal roof of the small, 3-room house sitting just 50 yards outside the airport perimeter fence. Inside, the air smells of old copper, hydraulic fluid, and warm toast. Thomas stands in the tiny kitchen, his rough, scarred fingers gently buttering a slice of bread. He does not need to look at what his hands are doing. His eyes are fixed on Toby, who is sitting at the small wooden dining table. Toby is 8 years old. He sits perfectly still, his head tilted slightly to the left, his sightless eyes looking toward the window. The boy is listening. He is always listening. A low, deep rumble vibrates through the floorboards. A Boeing 737 is spooling its engines on the main runway, preparing for departure. Toby's face lights up with a small, quiet smile. That is Flight 402 to Chicago, isn't it that? The boy's voice is soft, but clear. The wind is pushing from the east today, so the pilot had to increase the thrust on the right engine by 3% to stay centered on the wet line. Thomas stops what he is doing. He looks at his son, a mixture of profound pride and deep age swelling in his chest. You are exactly right, Toby. 3% extra on the right. How did you know? Toby points to his ear, tapping it twice with a tiny finger. The pitch of the fan blades is different when they fight the wind. It sounds like a cello, with a loose string. Thomas walks over to the table and places the plate of toast in front of the boy. He gently runs his hand over Toby's soft hair. Toby has never seen a plane. He has never seen his father's face, or the heavy iron tools that Thomas carries home in his leather bag every night. But Toby knows the airport better than any air traffic controller. He knows every aircraft by the rhythm of its landing gear, every engine by its unique harmonic signature. To Toby, the hangar is not a place of cold steel and screaming turbines. It is a grand orchestra, and his father is the conductor. Thomas sits down opposite his son, taking a slow sip of black coffee. He looks at the worn calendar hanging on the wall. Red circles mark the dates of Toby's upcoming medical appointments. Next month, a world-renowned specialist is arriving at the capital city's private medical center. It is a rare opportunity. A new surgical procedure that could repair Toby's optic nerves and let him see the light for the very first time in his life. But the cost of the surgery is astronomical. It requires $20,000 just for the initial deposit, an amount that Thomas's meager technician salary could never hope to cover. But Thomas has spent the last 5 years taking every extra shift, working weekends, and saving every penny. He has sacrificed his own health, his own comfort, and his own pride, enduring the constant pressure from the airport's new management. He has survived on 4 hours of sleep a night, all for that red circle on the calendar. He cannot afford to lose his job. He cannot afford to let Arthur blacklist him. If he is fired for insubordination, the insurance policy will lapse, the savings will be frozen, and the specialist will leave without ever seeing Toby. Thomas looks down at his hands. They are covered in deep, black grease stains that never fully wash away. His knuckles are swollen from decades of turning heavy wrenches in freezing hangars. To the young executives like Arthur, these hands are a symbol of a bygone era. They see Thomas as an expensive liability. A man who takes 3 hours to feel a part that a digital laser scanner can measure in 3 seconds. They do not understand that a laser scanner only measures the surface. They do not understand that metal has a memory. It knows every strain, every temperature drop, and every hard landing it has ever endured. And only a human hand, trained by 40 years of touch, can feel that memory. Thomas finishes his coffee and stands up. He has to get back to the hangar. Even though Arthur has ordered him off the flight line, Thomas cannot simply walk away. His conscience will not let him. He knows that the ATR 72 is still sitting on the apron, and the medical team is currently loading their equipment. He knows that if that plane takes off into the eye of the storm with a fractured main shaft, those 12 doctors will never make it to the flooded valley. And the children waiting for those heart surgeries will be left in the dark forever. Toby reaches out his hand, finding Thomas's sleeve with practiced ease. "Dad? Is something wrong? Your breathing is heavy, and the air smells like the rain is coming inside." Thomas takes his son's small, warm hand in his own. He squeezes it gently, hiding the tremor of anxiety in his voice. "Everything is fine, Toby. Just a big storm coming in. I have to go back and help secure the hangar doors." Toby looks up, his blind eyes searching the empty space in front of him. "Be careful, Dad. The wind today has a strange whistle in it. It sounds like something is trying to break." Thomas' heart skips a beat. Even from 50 yards away, inside a closed house, his son has heard the warning. The boy has heard the cry of the metal. "I will be careful, Toby. I promise." Thomas releases his son's hand, grabs his heavy yellow raincoat from the hook by the door, and steps out into the pouring rain. As the door clicks shut, the sound of the storm swallows him whole. But inside his head, The low, distorted rhapsody of the dying turboprop engine grows louder with every step he takes back toward the runway. He has no authority left. He has no security badge. But he has a duty. And he will not let that plane die. The rain has turned the runway into a dark mirror, reflecting the amber perimeter lights. Thomas walks through the side gate, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his wet yellow raincoat. Beside him, Toby walks with a steady, confident stride, his small hand tucked securely into his father's elbow. Toby does not stumble. He does not need to see the puddles to know where they are. He can hear the splash of his father's heavy boots, calculating the depth of the water by the pitch of the droplets. They approach the perimeter fence nearest to the engine test pad, where the massive ATR 72 sits. The twin Pratt and Whitney turboprop engines are running at idle speed. To the ground, crew standing 50 yards away under their umbrellas, it is just a routine ground run. But to Thomas, the sound is a chaotic mess. The low, steady hum of engine number 1 is a perfect, unbroken baritone. But engine number 2 is singing a different, terrifying song. Listen closely, Toby. Thomas whispers, leaning down so his voice is right next to his son's ear. Tell me what you hear in the second choir. Toby tilts his head, his small body freezing as he focuses every ounce of his sensory existence toward the roaring machine. His sightless eyes widen slightly under the hood of his tiny raincoat. It is shaking, Dad. But not like the wind shakes a tree. It is shaking like a glass that is about to crack when you hit it with a spoon. The high note is too sharp. It is supposed to be a sweet whistle, like a bird in the morning. But right now, it sounds like someone is scratching a knife against a plate. It is crying, Dad. It hurts. Thomas' chest tightens. The boy's description is perfect. What Toby is describing is a classic high-frequency harmonic distortion. When a high-tensile steel shaft develops a microfracture, the centrifugal force at high RPM forces the crack to open slightly, creating a tiny, razor-thin gap. As the pressurized air inside the engine housing rushes past this gap, it acts exactly like a whistle. It is a mechanical rate, vibrating at a frequency far beyond what the human ear normally pays attention to. Arthur's digital sensors fail to catch it because they are programmed to look for broad-spectrum vibrations. They look for the heavy, low-frequency shakes that indicate a loose bolt or a bent blade. They do not look for the tiny, microscopic whistle of a dying shaft because the software filters it out as background wind noise. But Thomas knows. He knows that once that engine reaches full takeoff power at 2200 RPM, the microscopic crack will expand under the heat and pressure. The moment the aircraft hits the turbulent, freezing air of the storm cloud, the sudden thermal shock will cause the metal to contract violently. The shaft will snap like a dry twig. The 12-bladed composite propeller, spinning at maximum velocity, will become a giant flying saw blade. It will slice through the cabin wall, directly where the doctors are sitting. Thomas looks at his watch. 20 minutes until taxi clearance. The medical team is already walking across the wet tarmac, carrying their silver equipment cases. Arthur is standing at the bottom of the passenger stairs, shaking hands with the lead surgeon, a prominent female doctor whose face is plastered on the city's billboards. Arthur is smiling, gesturing proudly toward the gleaming aircraft and the digital diagnostic terminal mounted on the hangar wall. He is selling his safety record to the world, completely blind to the tragedy, He is about to launch into the sky. Thomas takes a deep breath. He knows what he has to do. He looks down at Toby. Toby, I need your help. We have to go out there. We have to make them hear what we hear. Toby nods, his expression serious, devoid of any fear. I am ready, Dad. The machine needs us. Thomas grabs his small, worn canvas tool bag from his shoulder. Inside is no high-tech laser. Only a 3-pound brass hammer, a mechanical stethoscope, and a small wooden block. Tools from a different century. But today, they are the only things that can stand between 12 lives and a fiery grave. Thomas takes Toby's hand, and together, they step out from the shadow of the fence and walk directly toward the roaring aircraft. The wind tries to push them back, spraying cold rain into their faces, but Thomas' stride is iron. As they cross the yellow safety line, one of the ramp agents spots them through the driving rain. Hey, you can't be out here. The guard shouts, waving his orange light wands. Thomas ignores him. He keeps his eyes locked on the engine cowling of number 2. He can see the slight, almost imperceptible flutter of the metal paneling. It is a flutter that matches the exact rhythm of the whistle Toby described. Arthur hears the guards shout and turns around. His smile instantly vanishes, replaced by a look of absolute fury as he recognizes the old mechanic and the blind boy walking through the rain. Are you completely out of your mind? Arthur screams, his voice cracking as he runs toward them, his expensive leather shoes splashing mud onto his designer trousers. I told you to get off my flight line. Security. Get this old lunatic and his kid out of here right now. The doctors stop on the stairs, turning around in confusion. The lead surgeon frowns, looking from the angry young manager to the calm, resolute old man holding the hand of a sightless child. Thomas does not stop until he is standing directly beneath the massive wing of the ATR-72s, right in the shadow of the spinning blades of engine number 2. The wind from the propeller washes over them, smelling of burnt fuel and wet metal. Arthur Ives, panting, his face red with rage, 2 security guards flanking him. You are finished, Thomas. Arthur spits, pointing a trembling finger. I am calling the police. You are trespassing on a federal flight line during an active mission. You are going to jail for this, and your kid is going to state custody. Thomas stands his ground, his body shielding Toby from the wind. He looks past Arthur, directly at the cockpit window, where the captain is staring down at the commotion. Captain. Thomas roars, his voice carrying a raw, desperate authority that makes the guards hesitate. Shut down engine number 2. The shaft is failing. If you take this bird into the storm, you will not come back. The terminal glass vibrates with every clap of thunder. The sky over the runway is no longer gray. It is a bruised, heavy purple, sagging under the weight of the coming deluge. In the weather briefing room, the computer screens are pulsing with red warnings. The typhoon is moving faster than predicted. If the ATR-72 does not leave the ground within 20 minutes, the entire region will be locked down. For 12 children in the flooded valley, 20 minutes is the difference between a lifetime of heartbeats and none at all. Inside hangar 3, the air is thick with tension. Arthur stands at the center of the floor, his voice sharp and demanding. He is holding his digital tablet, tapping the screen with aggressive, decisive, rhythmic strokes. Sign the final release, Thomas. I don't have time for your dinosaur rituals today. The medical team is on the tarmac. The engines are already warming up, and you are stalling the most important launch of this quarter. Thomas stands in front of the hangar office desk, his hands steady, his eyes calm. In front of him lies the paper logbook. It is the old-school backup system, the one that requires a physical signature from the lead inspector before any aircraft is allowed to taxi. Arthur's digital system can override almost everything, but the aviation authority still requires this physical paper trail. And Thomas's signature line is empty. I will not sign it, Arthur. Thomas says, his voice flat, carrying the cold finality of iron. I will not sign a death warrant for those pilots and doctors. You need to pull the cowling on engine number 2 and let me inspect the main shaft with a dye penetrant. It will take 2 hours. Arthur takes a step forward, his eyes narrowing, his teeth clenched. 2 hours? In 2 hours, the storm will have closed the runway. In 2 hours, the media will be asking why our $1 million humanitarian mission is sitting in a dry garage. Your digital scan took 3 seconds, Thomas. It said the shaft is perfect. Why should I trust your ears over a multi-million-dollar AI diagnostic sweep? Because my ears don't have a profit margin, Arthur. Thomas steps closer, his boots heavy on the concrete. Your AI scanner is calibrated to find standard wear and tear. It looks for corrosion. It looks for stress fractures that have already opened. But a resonance crack in a high-tensile shaft doesn't show up on a static scan. It only screams when it is under load, when the thermal expansion of the pre-flight run forces the gap to vibrate. Your scanner doesn't listen. It only looks. And right now, it is looking at a killer and calling it clean. Arthur lets out a sharp, mocking laugh, turning to the young technicians who are standing in the shadows, keeping their heads down. Do you hear this? Our senior technician is claiming he can hear things that our quantum sensors cannot. Maybe it is time you got your ears checked, Thomas, or maybe it is just time you got out of the way. Arthur turns back to Thomas, his face hardening. The mask of professional courtesy completely gone. I know what this is about. You are terrified of the new system. You know that once this digital diagnostic rig is fully certified, we won't need an old man with grease under his fingernails to tell us if a plane can fly. You are holding this flight hostage to prove you still matter. It is pathetic. Thomas looks at the young technicians. None of them meet his eye. They know Thomas has spent 40 years keeping this airport's fleet incident-free. They know his hands have rebuilt the very engines they now scan with their tablets. But they also know that Arthur has the power to end their careers with a single email. They chose survival over truth. I am not trying to prove anything, Arthur. Thomas says softly, looking down at his worn canvas tool bag. Except that I care about the people on that plane. If you let that bird take off, the shaft will shear before they reach 10,000 feet. The propeller will slice through the forward fuselage like a hot knife through butter. You won't just lose a plane, Arthur. You will lose 12 of the best surgeons in this country. And you will have to look at their families and tell them that your screen said everything was green. Arthur's hand trembles with rage as he snatches the paper logbook off the desk. I don't need your signature. Under Section 4 of the Emergency Airport Protocols, the Chief of Maintenance can override a technician's hold if a certified digital scan shows 0 defects. I am signing the release myself. And as of this second, you are suspended. Hand over your security badge. You are no longer an employee of this facility. Thomas does not move. The silence in the hangar is deafening, punctuated only by the distant, rhythmic rumble of the storm and the steady, high-pitch whine of the ATR-72's engines out on the ramp. Hand it over, Thomas. Arthur repeats, stepping closer, 2 security guards moving up behind him. Or I will have these men drag you out of here in handcuffs, and I will make sure the police charge you with interference. Thomas slowly reaches up to his collar. E unclips his laminated security badge. The plastic is scratched, the photograph faded from years of sweat and hangar green. He looks at it for a brief second, then places it quietly on the desk. He does not say another word. He picks up his heavy wooden toolbox and his canvas bag, turns his back on the young manager, and walks toward the side exit. As he steps out into the rain, the cold water drenches his shoulders instantly. Behind him, he hears Arthur's triumphant voice echoing through the hangar speakers. All ground crew, the flight is cleared. Begin passenger boarding immediately. Thomas walks faster, his heart sinking into his stomach. He has spent his whole life protecting these machines, protecting the lives of strangers who never even knew his name. And now he is being forced to watch them walk into a trap he cannot stop. But as he reaches the outer perimeter gate, his eyes catch a small figure waiting under the shelter of the bus stop. It is Toby, holding his small white cane, his head tilted upward toward the sky. The metal gate of the airport perimeter screeches as Thomas pushes it open. He steps onto the narrow gravel path that runs parallel to the main runway, his heavy wooden toolbox clutched in his right hand. The rain is falling in dense, gray sheets now, obscuring the distant lights of the terminal. At the bus shelter, a small figure sits quietly on the wooden bench. Toby is wearing his oversized bright yellow raincoat, his small hands resting on the handle of his white folding cane. Despite the roar of the wind and the heavy splash of rain on the metal roof above him, the boy sits perfectly still, his chin tilted toward the sky. He is not looking at the clouds. He is tracking the world with his ears. As Thomas's boots crunch on the gravel, Toby's head immediately turns toward the sound. "That," the boy says, a soft smile breaking through the damp cold on his face. "You are walking heavy again. And your toolbox is shaking. Did you leave your keys inside?" Thomas stops in front of his son, letting out a long, ragged breath. He kneels down on the wet gravel, placing his toolbox on the ground, and gently takes Toby's hands. "No, Toby. I didn't leave my keys. I left my badge. We are going home now, son." Toby's smile fades, his brow furrowing as he reaches out to touch his father's face. His small fingers trace the deep, tense lines around Thomas's eyes and mouth. "But the big plane hasn't left yet, Dad. I can hear it. They are spooling the engines on the north ramp. They are preparing for takeoff. Why aren't you there to watch the pressure valves?" Thomas closes his eyes, feeling the cold rain run down the back of his neck. "The software says they don't need me anymore, Toby. They have a new machine. A machine that is never tired, never doubts, and never has to feel the metal." Toby shakes his head, his grip on his father's sleeve tightening. "But the machine is wrong, Dad. It is wrong." Before Thomas can answer, A massive, deafening roar shakes the ground beneath their feet. Across the tarmac, behind the high chain-link fence, the ground crew has begun the final high-power engine test on the ATR-72s. The twin turboprop engines scream into life, their 4-meter blades chopping through the dense, wet air with immense force. To any normal observer, the sound is a wall of white noise, a mechanical roar that drowns out all of creation. But Toby's body goes completely rigid. His head jerks toward the runway, his sightless eyes wide with a sudden, pure terror. He pulls his hand away from his father and presses both palms flat against the cold metal mesh of the perimeter fence. Dad. Toby screams, his voice cracking against the wind. Make it stop. Tell them to turn it off. Thomas stands up quickly, alarmed by the sheer panic in his son's voice. Toby, what is it? What do you hear? It is the second one, Dad. The boy cries, tears mixing with the rain on his cheeks. The second singer is dying. The sound is not round anymore. It is broken. It is like a cold silver wire that is being pulled too tight. It is screaming at the very top of its throat, and it is about to snap. Thomas freezes. A cold dread washes over him, colder than the rain. He steps up to the fence, closing his eyes, and forces himself to filter out the roar of the wind, the splash of the rain, and the rumble of the first engine. He focuses entirely on engine number 2. And then he hears it. Through the filter of his son's pure, unconditioned hearing, the truth becomes terrifyingly clear. Underneath the deep bass of the turbine, there is a tiny, erratic flutter. It is a harmonic microresonance. It is the exact sound a solid steel shaft makes when a microscopic fracture begins to propagate under extreme centrifugal force. At low idle, it was a subtle whistle. But now at 90% takeoff thrust, the centrifugal force is trying to tear the shaft apart. The metal is warping. The frequency is rising, shifting into a high-pitched, metallic scream that is just on the edge of human hearing. The digital sensors on Arthur's diagnostic rig did not register this because they are programmed to look for vibration amplitude, not frequency shift. The machine saw that the engine was not shaking violently, so it marked the test as green. It did not realize that the engine was not shaking because the shaft was still held in place by the massive tension of the propeller load. But the moment that tension shifts, the moment the pilots reduce power after takeoff, the shaft will shear. Thomas looks at his watch. 10 minutes. The aircraft is already starting to taxi toward the active runway. The yellow taxi lights are flashing through the rain. If that plane leaves the ground, 12 people will die within 5 minutes of takeoff. Thomas looks down at Toby. His son is trembling, his small hands still gripping the cold fence, his head shaking in agony from the discordant, screaming frequency. Dad, please. Toby whispers. You have to tell them. They don't know the wire is going to break. They think it is safe because they can't hear the cry. Thomas looks back at Hangar 3 and then at the dark silhouette of the moving aircraft. He knows that if he crosses that gate, he will be arrested. He knows that Arthur will call the police and his career will be over forever. He will lose his pension, his security, and his only hope of paying for Toby's surgery. But then he looks at his hands. These are the hands of a mechanic. A man whose only purpose is to keep people safe in the sky. If he walks away now to save himself, those 12 doctors will die. And Thomas will have to live the rest of his life, knowing that he saved his pension at the cost of 12 souls. He looks at Toby, his voice suddenly calm, clear, and filled with a quiet, ironclad resolve. Hold on to my bag, Toby. We are going back. Toby grips the strap of Thomas's canvas bag, his small face hardening with determination. I will hold on, Dad. Let's go. Thomas grabs his heavy toolbox, walks to the maintenance gate, and pushes it open with his shoulder. They step out onto the active taxiway, heading directly into the teeth of the storm and toward the moving giant. The rain does not merely fall. It attacks. It drives sideways across the open concrete of the active ramp, whipped into a frenzy by the wash of the giant propeller blades. Thomas keeps his head down, his heavy boots splashing through the oil-slicked puddles, his left hand holding Toby's small, cold fingers with an unbreakable grip. In his right hand, the old canvas tool bag swings heavily against his leg. They walk directly toward the nose of the ATR 72. The aircraft looks like a sleeping beast in the storm, its cabin windows dark, but its wingtips flashing with strobe lights that cut through the gray fog. A young ramp agent, holding 2 glowing orange batons, suddenly steps in front of them, his eyes wide under his plastic hood. Hey. Stop. This is a restricted area. No civilians on the ramp. Thomas does not slow down. He steps around the young man with a quiet, immobile force. I am not a civilian. I am the lead safety inspector for this line. And this aircraft is not going anywhere. Before the young guard can react, Arthur appears from behind the passenger boarding stairs. He is holding a large black umbrella, but the wind is so strong that the rain is already soaking his expensive wool overcoat. His face is twisted with a mixture of shock and sheer, unadulterated rage. Thomas? Arthur screams, his voice barely rising above the deafening hum of the idling engines. What are you doing back here? And you brought the blind kid? Are you out of your mind? He waves frantically to 2 larger airport security officers who are standing near the hangar entrance. Guards. Get this lunatic off my tarmac. Now. The guards run forward, their heavy boots clattering against the concrete. But they slow down when they see Toby. The small boy is standing perfectly still, his head tilted slightly upward, his sightless eyes hidden beneath his yellow hood. He is not looking at Arthur. He is listening to the engine. The high-pitched, metallic screech from engine number 2 is louder now, a painful, vibrating needle of sound that makes the boy wince. Thomas steps in front of his son, his tall frame blocking the guards. He looks past Arthur, directly at the passenger door of the aircraft, where the first group of pediatric surgeons is about to step onto the metal stairs. Arthur. Thomas shouts, his voice carrying the deep, resonant authority of a man who has commanded these runways for 40 years. Tell the captain to shut down engine number 2. No. My son can hear the resonance. The main shaft is failing. If they go to full takeoff power, the vibration will tear the turbine apart. Arthur lets out a harsh, mocking laugh that is swallowed by the wind. Your son? You want me to ground an $80 million flight because a blind child has a feeling? Look at my screen, Thomas. Arthur thrusts his glowing tablet directly into Thomas's wet face. The digital diagnostic is green. The A says the vibration index is 0.02, which is practically non-existent. Your kid is hearing things because he's blind and he's terrified of the noise. Get him out of here before I have him removed by force. Toby steps forward, his small hand reaching out until his fingers touch the cold, vibrating skin of the aircraft's landing gear strut. He doesn't look at Arthur. He speaks to the air, his voice remarkably calm despite the storm. The machine is lying to you. The boy says softly. The green lights are only looking at the outside. But inside, the heart is breaking. The singer is crying. It is crying at 2200 hertz. It is a very thin, very sharp sound. Like a fingernail scratching on glass. It is getting faster. It is going to break. One of the security guards, a veteran officer who has known Thomas for 20 years, stops and looks at the boy, then at the engine. He frowns, his head tilting as if trying to hear the sound himself. But all he can hear is the roaring wind and the deep bass hum. Arthur steps closer, his boots splashing mud onto Thomas' overalls. I don't care about his fairy tales. Arthur spits, his eyes narrow and cruel. You are a desperate, obsolete old man who is using his disabled kid as a prop to save his dying career. It's disgusting, Thomas. You are willing to risk the lives of those children in the valley, willing to delay this medical team just to prove a point. You are fired. You are banned from this facility for life. And if you don't take your blind boy and walk out of that gate in the next 10 seconds, I will personally file charges for reckless endangerment. The lead surgeon, a tall woman in her 50s, with gray hair tucked under her hood, steps down from the boarding stairs. She has been watching the confrontation, her sharp eyes moving between the young manager and the old mechanic. What is the delay here? She asks, her voice crisp and commanding. We have a surgical window in 3 hours. If we don't leave now, the storm will trap us. Arthur immediately changes his tone, his face shifting into a polite, professional smile. Dr. Vance, I apologize for this minor interruption. This is just a former employee who is having a personal crisis. He is refusing to leave the ramp. Our digital systems have cleared the aircraft 100%. There is absolutely no safety issue. We are ready for boarding. Dr. Vance looks at Thomas, then at Toby, who is still holding the landing gear strut, his head tilted, his small body shivering in the cold rain. She looks into the old mechanic's eyes. She does not see madness there. She sees the quiet, desperate terror of a man who knows exactly what lies ahead. The wind screams across the open tarmac, but for a second, the entire world seems to hold its breath. Dr. Vance stands on the lower step of the passenger stairs, her eyes locked onto the blind boy who is wet from the rain. Arthur's face is white, his knuckles turning purple as he grips his tablet. Get them off the field, he whispers to the guards, his voice shaking with a dangerous anger. Now. But the older security guard, the one who has known Thomas for 20 years, does not move. He looks at Captain Richard, who has just opened the cockpit window and is looking down at the wet runway. Captain Richard is a man who spent 25 years flying military transport planes through combat zones. He has survived engine fires, structural failures, and landing on dirt strips in the middle of the night. He knows what a machine sounds like when it is healthy. And he knows what a man looks like when he is telling the truth. The captain slides the window fully open, letting the cold rain spray onto his face. What is the frequency, boy? Richard's voice is deep, calm, and carries the weight of absolute authority. Arthur takes a step forward, waving his hands frantically. Captain, do not listen to this nonsense. We have a strict departure window. This kid is blind. He is not an engineer. Our digital sweep shows 0 defects. Shut up, Arthur, Richard says, without looking at the young manager. He keeps his eyes on Toby. Answer the question, son. Toby does not look up, but his hand remains pressed firmly against the cold, vibrating metal of the landing gear strut. 2200 hertz. The boy says, his voice small but steady. It is a sharp, broken song. It is hiding inside the low hum